Those outside counsel have to be approved by the county commission.
Correct.
And it's done on the recommendation of the county attorney.
Correct.
Or the request, and that would specify the pay rate that those folks would be paid.
That's correct.
All right. And the second category?
Second category would be a special prosecutor. And the special prosecutor is, I believe I'm correct on this, that the district attorney has sole discretion under very narrow circumstances, and I don't know how to define narrow circumstances, but that's how it's been described to me, to hire, independent of the board of commissioners, a special prosecutors.
Okay.
That's her decision and her choice.
But that
we
would
have nothing to do with that.
you wouldn't have anything to do with the selection or approval of that counsel.
That's correct.
Okay. But you would ultimately be paying for that counsel through the general appropriations bucket in the budget that you approve for the DA's office.
For special prosecutor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm told yes.
All right. And you're told that by your chief financial officer?
Yes.
That's her job to know?
Yes.
Okay. On those people.
We wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know the name of them
No.
or how much they're being paid?
No.
But you're going to see a line item on an audit at the end of the year showing how much that person was paid?
Is that correct?
They're typically captured as professional services expenses.
And is that in a group or individual?
It's professional services object code within the district attorney's budget within the general fund.
All right. That's didn't educate me. I'm wanting to, does that mean if Ms. Willis hires 15 special prosecuting attorneys and pays them $10 million, that's all you see is that $10 million was spent for that type of personnel, or does it give you how much Mr. Wade got, how much Mr. Johnson and Mr.
So our system captures all of that, but as far as how our reports roll up, at the object code level, you would just see the total amount. You would have to actually go into the accounting system to extract the details of the payments for professional services, because there may be more than just legal services or outside or special prosecutor services within the object code for professional services.
You got professional services, it doesn't even delineate how much is attorneys and how much is a janitor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if I want to find out how much Mr. Wade was paid for his services as a special prosecutor, who has that data? I want to issue a subpoena to find that out. Do I give it to you as the county and you can discern that? Or do I have to go to whoever hired this professional service provider?
The county actually has an open government platform. You could go to our open checkbook and you could search by the name, and it would pull up the name of any vendor that matches that description, and you could find payments that way. So you could go in and type in Mr. Wade's name or the name of his law firm, and you would be able to pull those documents. You could also submit an open records request to the finance department, and the accounts payable team would pull the details and provide that documentation, or you could subpoena probably the district attorney or any member of her staff that is involved in their internal accounting and vendor payment process.
It
was included in my subpoena.
Right. So that's my question.
Yes.
Can you find that information?
Yes.
Or do I have to go to the DA who may not provide
No,
it?
we have that information.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you can tell me the recipient by name of these professional services payments.
What we provided today was specific to Mr. Wade. We are working on, the request also included any other attorney, so we are still working on that. Our process is we are searching now through all of the transactions within that professional services object code, pulling out the ones that appear to be legal firms and pulling the underlying supporting documentation to determine if they were in fact legal firms and if those expenses are responsive to the subpoena, and if so, they will be provided.
And I know I might sound a little lawyerish here. I don't mean to be hounding you, but I'm wanting to make sure that I address that subpoena to the right person. And I'm told you are the bomb. You are the answer to financial questions in Fulton County, or can get them. If I'm wrong, help direct me where I need to submit additional subpoenas to track down that information.
No, sir. Submitting a subpoena to me is should be sufficient.
And I will say on the record, you have been very responsive, and I know it's a lot of data and information, and I appreciate your efforts to continue providing that to me.
Thank you.
You have been completely transparent and helpful in trying to find things. So you said supporting documentation. What kind of supporting documentation would there be for a professional services payment to a law firm?
Typically, their billing statement.
Okay. Do you have supporting documentation to show you a contract with them, with the independent contractor between the legal services provider and the district attorney's office or the county?
The contracts typically are not provided as part of the supporting documentation. It can be requested, but
From you or from the DA's office?
If I have it, I will provide it. If I don't have it, and it's something that I can't get, then I wouldn't be able to provide it.
Okay. Because this is sounding to me kind of like the Wild West. Very little control from Fulton County over a $36 million budget. You don't know how much of that is spent on professional services, who is hired, how much they're paid per hour, what their total compensation is, yet you're being asked to provide $36.6 million a year that you know encompasses a number of those type of independent contractors that you're funding with no oversight or control, right?
Yeah, the Board of Commissioners has no oversight over the district attorney.
Okay. So your only control is the power of the purse, whether you continue funding money that can be used for those purposes, or whether you restrict that funding. Is that fair, Chairman Pitts? I guess that's really your question.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Chairman?
So your only control is the power of the purse, is either granting or rejecting requests for additional funding from the DA's office.
That's correct.
Okay. And that has to be based upon assurances presented to you by the DA as to why she would need particular amounts of funding?
Right. The DA can come before the board and make a request at any time, and we would consider the request, and if we agree, then we'll grant it.
Right.
If we disagree, then we won't grant it.
And in that request, do you require her to give some specifics? Some who I want to hire, why I need to hire somebody, how much I want to pay them, what's going to be the cap on their
We don't
service?
get into that sort of detail. I mean, she'll would make a case as to why the need is there and what it would cost. But as far as individual names and what the compensation for a given individual would be, we don't get that kind of detail, nor do we ask it.
Did DA Willis ever make a request for specific funding for a special assistant DA, prosecuting DA for for Mr. Wade?
Not to my knowledge.
And is her position that she doesn't have to ask or provide that information to the county in order to make a supplemental funding request?
Well, again, with respect to the special prosecutor, that's solely the purview of the district attorney, unlike the outside counsel.
All right. But you fund the district attorney based upon her stated needs or her request for funding, right?
Correct.
Okay. In her budget request, does she have a category for special prosecutors?
I don't recall seeing a special category.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would have to say that she, as have prior district attorneys, have asked for resources, trial expense resources,
Right.
without it being specific to X amount for a special prosecutor or X amount for expert witnesses or, things like that. I think that it's been more like we know we have these major prosecutorial matters that will be moving forward and will require additional resources, but I don't recall there being any specific line item details necessarily associated with that.
All right, so we heard testimony at a previous meeting that there was a team of at least 10 assistant DAs working on an election interference case, and at least 3 special counsel that are being paid as independent contractors, including Mr. Wade. Was that ever described to the county commission in any of the funding requests?
I don't recall that coming before the board.
So she never came to you and said, I'm going to need a lot of money here to conduct this prosecution of, now there's 16 different defendants I'm going to call it the election interference case. Was that ever expressed to the county commission that that's part of why you were asked to give $36.6 million?
Again, not with that level of detail. So again, trial expenses.
Just generically, not even for the type of prosecution?
I want to say for the 23 budget, and I will have to go back and verify this, that there was some communication where she identified a need for resources because she expected to have to retry a case that had been a high-profile case, as well as the gang matters that she has. I think there are a couple of those, and the elections, the elections interference matter as well. But again, it was a lump sum, not specific with line item details.
Right. So you think that was in her budget request, perhaps in 23? Are we talking about Young Thug trial that's been it's gone on forever and ever so far, or different gang-related?
I believe there is more than one gang-related, large-scale prosecutorial matter. But yes, sir, that would be one of them.
And you think she may have also itemized the election interference case would require additional funds, or categorize that as an area of needed funding?
Yes, sir. Again, I would have to go back and look. Well, I don't, because
You don't have to go back anymore. You've got your right-hand woman right there to help you.
So, yes, sir. That was Sabrina McTier, the county's budget manager. So this is from the 23 budget enhancement request, and the description says, and I'll just read it, The general rule, the more complicated a case, the more likely expert witnesses, e.g. professional services, are needed. That was in parentheses. State versus Tex MacGyver has been remanded to this office. This case alone cost $675,000 in professional services. I have this case and several anti-corruption cases that are being litigated in 23. It is sufficient to enhance this budget, and the request was $1.1 million.
So that was for Tex MacGyver and any other public corruption case?
Yes, sir. So that's the kind of description that I was perhaps not doing a very good job of,
No, you're doing great.
expressing, but
You're doing great. And as far as your recollection, Chairman Pitts, is that she never named that she would need a special prosecutor on any election interference case.
Not that I recall, sir.
Certainly never told you the names of who she might be hiring or how much she was going to have to pay them.
Not that I recall, sir.
Did she make other budget enhancement requests back in 2023, 21, or 22? I can't remember exactly when she was sworn in. Y'all know that?
Madam DA was sworn in and began her term in 2021. So we did receive enhancement requests from her for the 22 budget cycle, the 23, and the 24.
Okay. What was the $5 million enhancement request for clearing up homicide backlogs? Do y'all recall that? That was testified to here last meeting.
That was a request that came through in the middle of 2021. She requested additional staff to support a number of items, the outstanding homicide situation being one of them. Ultimately, in 2021, through a budget amendment process that we call budget soundings, the Board of Commissioners did authorize her to have funding for an additional 55 positions.
Wow.
It was a mix of attorneys, investigators, and administrative support personnel. And in 21, the cost that was necessary to begin to onboard those positions, because she would not be able to do all 55 at one time, was less than $800,000. I think the budget soundings was $780,000 and some change. But the full annual cost for that is the $5 million. And so we built that in then to her 2022 budget with the full year funding for all of the positions that the board awarded her mid-year in 2021.
And was there any mention in that $5 million enhancement request that would be needed for any type of public corruption investigation?
I will have to go back to the source document to confirm that.
What do you call that source document? Because I'm going to want to make sure I have adequately identified what I need to be produced.
I would call it a budget soundings request.
Okay. And can you provide those to me without me submitting an additional subpoena? I think they're included in what I've asked for. I may not have been as specific because I didn't know what to call it.
Yes, sir. I had intended to include the 2021 soundings information as part of the request for the budget information that was already included.
And you can just follow up and get that to me or Secretary Cook at your convenience. And if you would do that for any of those sounding requests for 21, 22, 23, and 24, just to keep me up to speed. Because, Chairman Pitts, what I am hearing from you is that the Board of Commissioners never got any kind of specific request for additional funding to prosecute any election interference cases, other than that generic $1 million, in 23.
Not that I recall, sir.
And no specific information about who needed to be hired as an independent contractor or what they would cost. I understand Governor Barnes was too expensive, and I just didn't know if that's that y'all figured that out or she ruled him out for that reason.
No, not that I recall.
I am subject to higher in amount.
He's a gun for hire if anybody out there is paying attention, and pleasure to have you in the audience with us today, Governor Barnes. And I'm just wanting us to get a feel and for exactly how much oversight there is. It sounds like it's very loose as far as employment practices and expenditures for independent contractors.
Yeah, that information doesn't come before the board.
Right. Only you have to peel it out in these soundings and in the annual audit and in the budget submissions as she gives you the categories of what she needs.
That's correct. And when budget soundings come before the board, there's a little more detail and more specifics.
Right. Probably pretty difficult politically for you and the Board of Commissioners to reject a request for needed funding to clear up a backlog in homicide cases, right?
Well, I mean, we had such a tremendous number of cases that were so-called, had been there for up in the thousands. And we decided that the $75 million from the ARPA funds has already been referenced by Ms. Whitmore.
Right.
So in order to, we threw, $75 million of I think we received a total federal allocation of about $206 million in ARPA funds, and $75 million of that $206 million went to the justice system.
Right.
And the justice system meaning everything that the CFO has outlined.
So that was back in the fall of 2021. It was about the same time Mr. Wade was being hired. And it wasn't mentioned to you that any of the enhanced money was going to go towards Mr. Wade or any other special prosecutor to prosecute election interference.
No, it was my understanding that that $75 million was to be used for the justice system, and specifically, sort of specifically, to reduce the tremendous backlog that we had.
And there was a $5 million enhancement that was from county funds, not the ORCA funds, or is that the same money?
Is that the same money?
No. The $5 million is general fund,
Okay.
county.
And in that request, that was on top of the ORCA funds to get rid of the backlog of homicide cases.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. She actually asked for over 100 positions. When she made the request, and the way in which we addressed it was we already had the backlog program in development, and so we identified a certain number that would be funded through the backlog project out of the ARPA resources, and the balance we provided for out of the county's general fund.
And this is back in the fall of 2021.
Yes, sir.
2 years before her $1.1 million request for public corruption and Tex MacGyver.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did she ever report back to you the progress being made? What kind of bang you were getting for your buck? You're giving her tens of millions of dollars in either ORCA funds or federal, state, county general funds to get rid of this backlog. Did she do it?
I don't recall any specific report back to the board from the district attorney. However, at each meeting of the board, we would receive an update on progress that was being made. That's accurate, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, sir. As part of our global pandemic response, we presented the Board of Commissioners with an update for a while at every board meeting, and then eventually at just one meeting a month to update them on our progress using our ARPA resources, and specifically on the backlog project, showing total backlog cases, progression of those cases through, through the system. And so we've been reporting on that regularly up until February of this year due to our cyber incident. So we are almost ready to begin that reporting process. Again, the last report that we made of the progress of Project Orca was in January, at the second meeting of the Board of Commissioners in January, and that was for progress through the end of 2023.
So would that list the number of homicide cases that are pending and how many are being resolved on a monthly basis?
It doesn't list case type. It lists the total number of projects, the total number of cases by each of the players, if you will, the solicitor, the in the magistrate court, the district attorney, and then superior court and state court. So we kind of track the progress of the cases from the two prosecutors, from the solicitor and the district attorney into their respective courts, and then we track the progress that the courts themselves are making in fully adjudicating the cases. So that information is all presented to the board in a chart and discussion, and what's happening, all the various different things that we had to do in order to see that line make the progression that we were looking for.
So how many backlog cases were there? Do you have a ballpark figure how bad this got back in 2021? We're a year into the pandemic, courts are not trying cases. And oh, wow, you got a full color report there. Is that in my notebook?
We'll get an exact number. It was.
We started our drop date that we used to define our backlog cases was December 6, 2021,
Okay.
And we started with a total of 148,209 open and active cases in any stage.
That included solicitor's office
Yes.
that prosecutes
Yes.
misdemeanors.
Across
and
the justice
DA's
system.
office that prosecutes the felony offenses.
Yes, sir.
Does it break them out? How many are state court versus superior court?
The state court, the starting point for the state court was 20,124.
So the vast majority of them, or at least 2/3 of them. What's the superior court?
Superior court was 15,888.
Okay. Then you got magistrate courts as well, I guess.
Magistrate court was 39,435.
And that can be everything from a speeding ticket to parking ticket, very minor
Variety
things.
of,
Okay.
yes, sir.
What else you got? Municipal court, I guess?
The solicitor general had 56,462 at the starting point. And the district attorney had 16,300.
Okay. Where's the 16.3 now, or at the end of 2023? Has the DA used all these millions to any good to catch up?
From our report in January, the district attorney's number was 130 cases that were the original ORCA. So this is only tracking the cases that were considered in the ORCA backlog that started at 148. So again, these resources were only supposed to be focused on reducing those cases. There were still new cases, of course, that come into the system since that point in time.
Right.
And this report does not talk about those. This is specifically focused on those ORCA cases.
Those new ones are not funded through the ORCA funding.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Repeat those two numbers to start in January.
For who?
The start for the DA, you started at 16,300 and ended up with 130.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was from
December 6th of 2021 through 12/31/2023.
And we can't discern whether they're dismissed cases, whether they're plea bargain cases, or trials to a verdict.
Not from this report, no,
Okay.
sir.
They just got out of the system, resolved one way or another.
So for the district attorney, they were either moved on to Superior Court, which is where her cases would typically go, which means she still has to then prosecute them. But what we were tracking is, the cases that she had where, they were still sitting in, per se, in her queue, if you will.
Yeah.
So from 16.3 down to 130, they either moved on into the further into the prosecutorial process, or yes, they were dismissed, or whatever the other term is that you would use when a court case doesn't progress, when a matter doesn't progress.
Did your reporting requirements for these ORCA funds require any detail as to the successful completion of a case, whether there was a conviction or a plea, or they just dismissed it, or did they break it down for you that way? Or just one lump sum number of these cases are resolved, they're no longer in our system, in our queue?
We did not require that reporting, that level of reporting to the Board of Commissioners. We do have, I believe, that level of reporting from our criminal justice system, but it's just not included in what we reported to the board.
And does that criminal justice system of Fulton County prepare a report giving those annual updates or dispositions of cases?
They have not. This is something that the executive team worked on. For Project ORCA, there was a steering committee that was established that, like the chief judge of Superior Court, chief judge of State Court, magistrate court, chief judge, the clerk of Superior Magistrate Court, they all participated in the steering committee process. Our former COO, Alton Adams, guided them through that process. So there was no explicit reporting requirement for that detailed level of information made by the board to the group, but the board did want to see, the results of their efforts. So, Mr. Alton worked with the judicial partners in developing the information that was reported back to the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah. So you think that criminal coordinating council, or whatever they're called, kept data that specific as to the outcomes of the cases?
I think it's in our justice, it's in our system, and can be pulled out. I don't know. I didn't participate in those sessions, so I don't really know what they did with that information.
Who would you recommend me asking to pull that data out? Who should I submit a request for, ask to come testify to us?
Yeah, probably Alton, wasn't it?
Perhaps Mr. Adams, Alton
He's
Adams.
no longer the COO?
He is semi-retired. He is continuing to work with the county as a fee-based employee to help us move further down the road with the potential replacement jail project.
Mr. Adams, a fee-based employee? Does that mean he's still working just on an hourly basis?
Yes,
or
sir.
Kind of a consulting type thing?
Project more specific to the project, the replacement jail project.
Okay, so that's the project, replacement jail project?
Yes, sir.
Okay.